Welcome to the Just Basketball Show, a responding to breaking news edition of the show. I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice. Rate and review us as well. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and all these other places. Breaking news. Wish we had a sound. Kyrie Irving to the Dallas Mavericks. After he requested a trade, after Chris Haynes reported he wasn't going to play through the deadline, Kyrie Irving to Dallas for a 2029 first. Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie, 2 seconds in there as well. Kyrie gets what he wants. He gets the trade. Dallas goes in, getting a second star to pair with Luka Doncic, trading away one of its key wings in the process, trading away one of its future firsts in the process. TBD on when he'll debut, what this means for the contract situation with Kyrie. Does he get what he wants in that sense from Mark Cuban and Nico Harrison, who was with him at Nike? But Brendon, Kyrie Irving is now a Dallas Maverick. What is your initial reaction to this news?
My initial reaction is they have to be pretty sure that Luka Doncic likes this. I would imagine he must. You're hearing a lot, seeing a lot on Twitter about this deal related to Nico Harrison and the relationship that Mavs general manager Nico Harrison has to Kyrie and their time working together at Nike. And, you know, maybe there is an element of that. And this is kind of the thing you bring in a Nike executive to be able to pull off if you're going to make him your GM. But the Luka side of this is, I think, what's the most interesting to me. I'm not positive it's an amazing fit, but I think for the relatively small package compared to what it takes to get most superstar players that this took, I think it's a reasonable swing, and it makes Dallas a lot better this season at the very least.
Kyrie and Luka is so much on-ball sauce that I don't even, like, how this looks on offense is going to be incredible. Luka Doncic, obviously one of the most heliocentric players in the league, probably the most heliocentric player in a post-Houston James Harden world. Gets Kyrie, who like thrives with the ball in his hands, will do some other stuff, can spot up off ball, can be a really guy, a guy that can score in other ways, but is kind of most known for what he does with the ball in his hands. And now you have Luka and him on the floor together, kind of just generating a ton of offense. Like, and what does this mean for Dallas? Like, how seriously do we take them? It's kind of where we go. I think Kyrie is going to, like, that team should be really good offensively. Their defense has not been as good this year. Kyrie obviously is not going to help that. Luka, Christian Wood, and Kyrie as like a three-man trio is probably going to be awesome offensively with a very little defensive resistance. Finney-Smith was like a really solid, competent wing shooter for them and a defender. I get the gamble if you're Dallas, ultimately. Like, there's a lot about Kyrie that makes me trepidatious about him and feel insecure about him and what he is at this point. I do think like his apex as a player to date was 2016, and everything else that came since has been not nearly as good as he was then, and maybe not always worth the headaches that he's providing you. It's why like teams aren't going to give him a 4-year deal. And that's maybe the biggest hanging thread over this, Brendon, is like what kind of contract is Kyrie going to get from Dallas if he's going to stay there or whatever? What does that look like? But like this is a bet on star. This is a bet on star talent above anything else, and I can understand that part of it at the very least.
You're seeing from Woj already that Dallas is not seem to be treating this as a lock that this is us trading for, you know, Kyrie plus an extension, which is interesting to me because as much as I think from a Dallas standpoint, it was a predictable move because they had the types of role players, veteran role players that I think we knew Brooklyn would be attracted to, considering they still have Kevin Durant on their team and they're up in the standings where they probably want to not have this season go to waste. It's a little bit surprising to me that the Mavs aren't treating it that way, though, from the standpoint that 2029 first-round pick, unprotected. I mean, we've been talking about that from the Lakers' standpoint. It's a little more risky from the Lakers' standpoint because of the way their stars are from a, Anthony Davis injury, LeBron age point of view. Luka's a little more steady, but that is a valuable pick. And Dorian Finney-Smith. And so when I see that they're not treating it as a long-term commitment, that sort of makes sense in the desperation that we maybe knew Dallas was going to have. Okay, it all lines up. But then when I look at what it costs to get him, that is where I start to fall off with my following of this decision a little bit. Those are two really valuable assets, Finney-Smith and that pick. And Dinwiddie's probably a little redundant now that Kyrie's in place, just like he was once upon a time in Brooklyn. My question, and this is not trolling, Chris.
Yeah.
Did Sean Marks in 2023 just get a better deal for Kyrie than the Cavs did in 2017?
Oh, boy.
I mean,
well,
Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, and a Brooklyn unprotected pick. I think I like
that became Colin
Dorian,
Sexton, who they did then trade for Donovan Mitchell. So,
kind of.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to put you in a. I didn't mean to do that.
I will
to you,
say
but
that press conference that was Ante Zizic, Jay Crowder, and Isaiah Thomas and Kobe Altman in the Cavs media room is one of the most awkward press conferences I've ever been to in my entire life, and I will never forget that until the day I die. As a very awkward person myself, it just was radiating off of everything going on there, and I think about that from time to time. I mean, maybe they did, but it's this is. I would not. This also makes me wonder, okay, what was the There's clearly, I think we also view this through the prism of the Lakers and their interest in him as well. I think we have to kind of think about it through this because the Clippers had interest and Law Murray from The Athletic had it. They put in a strong offer, whatever that means. The Lakers obviously have interest. LeBron said as much when he was duh, would this guy help our team? When Dave McMenamin asked him about it the other night. I wonder if this is that we have to also view this through the net saying we're going to still try to compete with Kevin Durant. And that's part of this as well, and why he ends up in Dallas. If they looked at what they're going to get from these other teams, whether it was Kennard and John Wall and a pick from the Clippers or whatever was going to be there, the Lakers, which is probably Russ and a pick, and you're sitting back two players out in that trade, and maybe you didn't want to trade Joe Harris, who you like as a shooter and has been around that team for a long time now, dating back to the Kenny Atkinson era. I wonder if this is also the Nets being this is a chance for us to keep Kevin Durant surrounded by a lot of shooty, switchy forwards. It's another ball handler to kind of not put too much pressure on Ben Simmons to have to create a bunch again now. Finney-Smith can shoot it off of Ben, and we have ways to go 5 out or play, with not have to rely on Ben for wing defense and stuff. This feels almost like a kind of hedging to help with Kevin Durant in some way too for the Nets, which is kind of maybe a weird way to look at this considering this is about Kyrie Irving getting traded. But that is where part of my brain goes here is wondering what this means for the Nets plan in terms of Kevin Durant, who's the best player affected by any of this trade, I think, as of right. Yes, Luka is as well, but what happens with Durant is the big domino kind of after this now.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely why it didn't end up happening with the Lakers is you had their best offer, unless it was going to get really complicated with a 3-team construction that would send Russell Westbrook to some other team and more role players to the Nets. Unless it was going that route, you're talking about Russ, who is either going to have to play with KD again, which would have been an all-time, you want to talk about awkward press conferences, that would have been up there. Or he's getting bought out, and you're just treating the real trade as getting picks. Not sure what picks do to help Kevin Durant right now. And so there didn't really seem to be a good pathway that would include the Lakers that was simple. And when you're presented, if I'm Sean Marks and I'm presented with effectively what that package would have been in the form of Dallas's eventual offer, which is a 2029 unprotected first-round pick, 1 unprotected pick, and multiple role players, and I don't have to deal with a third team, I don't have to deal with Russell Westbrook, maybe even getting a player I'm familiar with in Spencer Dinwiddie helps, I just think this was the cleaner solution. I don't know if it's the absolute best deal they could have struck to build a team around Kevin Durant, but I think it's pretty darn close. I think I like these two guys coming back to Brooklyn from Dallas better than anything the Clippers would have been able to give. Is it going to be putting Kevin Durant where he would have been if Kyrie kept playing at an all-star starter caliber pace?
Oh, this affects the All-Star team too. This is the least important thing, but now
Well, I guess he can replace Steph then, right? Who we're about to talk about. Kyrie can be the other Western Conference All-Star starter. But no, I think from the KD standpoint, Chris, they probably have had conversations with Durant, right? And I think this at least says to me they're unlikely to trade him in the next 5 days. I don't know about anything beyond that. But you don't make a trade centered on this type of a package if you don't think you at least have KD for the rest of the year and you're trying to maximize whatever that will be for you.
Let's turn this back to Kyrie for a second. If you're Dallas, how do you evaluate Kyrie being a success for you in the end of the season? What would make it worth it to you to give him 2 years, which is like the most I could see any team really giving him, unless like Mark Cuban loses his mind and gives him 4 years, which seems insane. He is eligible for an extension now. You could tack 2 years onto it, at least I think until June. I think you could extend 2 years up to a certain number. But if you're Dallas, how would you view Kyrie Irving as a success if you make this trade now and are trying to what this year would make it a success for you?
It's an interesting question, right? I mean, I think it has to do with Luka more than anything. I think it might be stuff that we don't necessarily get a feel for. And this is not like, I think some of the Luka stuff, like you pay attention to the people who really know that Dallas team. I think some of the like Luka might get mad talk was probably just talk. I don't think we were going to go from, surprising Western Conference Finals run to, sorry, I'm getting more text as all of this is coming in.
This is phone blow up season. Like my dad texted me like a confused emoji. Like I have a group text
covering
that
the Suns at this point in time too is just just a nightmare.
I've been texting some Cavs people about this, about Kyrie last couple of days, and some of the responses have like made me giggle. And I'm curious to talk to them about this trade. But like Brendon, the Mavs right now are 9.5. They're 9.5. Mavs are 9.5 out of first right now. They are firmly like not in the race for the 1 seed, but they are only they are a game back of the 4th seeded Clippers, 2.5 back of the 3rd seeded Kings.
What I was going to say is the Luka part of this is what's most important to me, because last year they made the conference finals, right? So it's like, well, are you saying you need to go further than that? I hear you. They were in a little bit of a worse place this year. They were, they won 50 games last season. So I get feeling like you needed to do something. But if the goal is like we need to get further than we did last year, you're not going to measure it that way. I don't think if you're Mark Cuban, you're going to measure it as, does he fit with Luka? Does Luka like how this feels? Does Kyrie work in this locker room? Is he available? Can we get through to him in a way that others have not been able to? I think it's all going to be that stuff that no one else has been able to do with Kyrie since, like you said, 2016, the LeBron era, basically. That's going to have to be the measuring stick, because success on the court, the Mavs are already a little bit ahead of schedule the past offseason or past postseason.
We now have Chris Haynes tweeting, the Phoenix Suns
This
are
is
prepared.
what I got. This is the text I got.
Chris Haynes from TNT and Bleacher Report, I believe, host of a new podcast on Mark Stein. Prepare to pursue Brooklyn Nets star Kevin Durant, should to become available, league sources tell at NBA and TT at Bleacher Report. So, here we go. Here we go.
But does that sound right to you on the Mavs side of this? That would make the deal like a success?
I think it is Luka. It is Luka related. It is Luka. Like, what does he feel about this? How does he feel like it meshes with Kyrie? It's notable. Mark Stein has reported now that they talked to Luka about this trade. Jason Kidd wanted this trade. And wanted them to go do this. So there is like buy-in, it seems like, or at least some communication within this organization about wanting this. I think if this feels like an ultimate vibe thing, in what Kyrie is going to provide, how he fits with Luka. Like, Kevin Durant, I think, is one of the beauties of his game that we don't maybe appreciate enough, is like how good he is at adapting to other superstars. He is like if you're going to play with another it's like him and Steph are the two guys that if I was going to be a superstar and say who's the guy that I could play with that's going to like allow me to be me as much as possible, it is Steph and it is Durant. Think about how Durant played in Golden State. Think about how Durant played with Westbrook way back in Golden State. Think about how he playing with Kyrie and Harden and what he sacrifices, and it's still just the best player on those teams, right? That's not really like what Luka does. I can't see Luka like acquiescing in that same way. Just what does that mean for Kyrie? How does that look? How long does it take to figure out and like what does that mean for just all of this? And it's just like one of these really funny situations where it's like I wonder if that like there's this like this is such an interesting alternate world where like Dallas could have just given Jalen Brunson 4 years, $55 million or whatever, and they keep this pick and they keep DFS and Dinwiddie, and like maybe they're better off, but you end up in the situation where you lose Brunson last summer. You're looking for a superstar or a co-star at the very least to pair with Luka, and you end up here, and you're the team taking the risk on Kyrie, who has not had a normal season of basketball in like half a decade at this point. It's just like this. This is what happens when certain decisions don't go the right way, and with Kyrie, it's just like. This is the ultimate gamble of someone was going to do this. He's too talented for someone not to do this. I thought it was going to be the Lakers. You correctly called when we recorded a segment that will never see the light of day. You called Dallas. I get how we get here. It's a very tricky thing, and like it's another chapter in the Kyrie saga. And I cannot wait to see what Luka has to say about this. Can't wait to see what Kevin Durant has to say about this. The first LeBron comments when the Lakers play next are going to be incredible. Can't wait for that. Like, there's just so much that is yet to unfold here, and this feels very weird.
Durant thoughts to close, since we do seem to be there's vultures circling the corpse of the Brooklyn Nets as they appear to see it as a corpse. I'm not sure.
Look, here's the thing. Whether it's at this deadline or in the summer, if Kevin Durant says, I want out, and he makes it like a little messier than he did last summer when he wanted out and didn't really make it as messy as he probably could have, there are a lot of good players on the Nets roster that teams should be looking to try and, like, say, DFS now is in that list. Joe Harris. I would put Royce O'Neal on that list. There are good players on that roster that you should go out and be trying to nab if you're some other teams, if the Nets do decide to pivot at any point. Durant is the big one, but there's a lot of really good role players on that team that would be upgrades for other teams right now if they could go get them.
I just don't think you make this trade unless you think those pieces of Dinwiddie and Finney-Smith are coming over to help Kevin Durant. I just can't see why they wouldn't take the Lakers trade if they thought Durant was a flight risk right now. Now, clearly, Sean Marks and Kevin Durant don't see eye to eye. He asked for the dude to be fired, right? So it's not like I'm coming at this from a perspective that those guys are close and they make every decision in lockstep with one another. But I just can't see them pulling the trigger this fast, not even really letting a big bidding war unfold, and taking that package of Dinwiddie and Finney-Smith if the next, 12 hours result in Kevin Durant asking out. What good is Dorian Finney-Smith on a bad team, right? So
yeah,
I just think I'm going to discount the Kevin Durant stuff for now, and we'll have to see where it goes. But if you're talking about a deal, setting aside the lunacy of Kyrie's last 24 months that touches the most big deal people in the league, like not even players, but just like the most important human beings in the NBA, talking about a deal that affects Luka, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James is about as big as it gets, and we don't know how any of those three people are going to see this in the rest of this season and beyond. But I agree with you. I don't feel like Kevin Durant is anywhere near a lock to start next season with the Nets. I don't want to make it seem like I'm comfortable with them long term, but doing it in the next 4 days, I think KD would have to make it really ugly really fast for them.
Buckle up. Let's see if anything else happens the next couple of days. I'm sure this is a story we'll talk about more and more as it comes. This is, again, very fresh, but Kyrie Irving is now a Dallas Maverick, his fourth NBA team. The Nets, Kyrie, James Harden era is officially done. It is now just the KD era. A lot to be said about how Brooklyn constructed and how that all kind of happened. I think that's maybe an episode in the summer for us to do, Brendan, to come back and unpack this whole entire era and how you kind of build some of these things out. And Brendan, the last thing I will say, we're in the player empowerment era. I do wonder if stuff like this kind of makes teams a little more hesitant to just give certain players whatever they want and give up team control in some way, because the Nets kind of just handed things over to Kyrie and Kevin. More so Kevin than Kyrie.
Maybe not let. I think it'll be a cautionary tale for the package deal era, maybe.
Yeah.
Where, you're seeing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander blossom in Oklahoma City. That's another one with the Clippers, right? Where you have to get Paul George. I'm Kawhi Leonard. You have to get Paul George, or I'm not coming, or I'm going to go to the Lakers, or whatever I'm going to do. And then that deal blows up a little bit.
I have one last thing. Are the Nets better? I think Dallas is more interesting in some ways, but are the Nets better in some ways?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think the Nets are better because I just think at the end of the day, as great as Kevin Durant is, as great as he was this season, and he made the joke about how he was keeping them afloat when it was Edmund Sumner and whoever else, you just need more firepower than they have, I think, to win multiple playoff series in that conference, which is pretty stacked at the top. I think both teams might be the same or worse. I'm not even going to say Dallas. I'm not going to stand here and tell you I think they're going to be higher in the standings because of this. Maybe their championship upside, just for the same reason I said about Brooklyn, is higher because you have Kyrie on the roster. But I don't know if this is a win-win at all. I think it might be more of a lose-lose or a trade in terms of what actually affects who wins the title this year.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if the Nets make any of their moves to maybe go get another big and what that could lead them to. But Brennan, let's end that part of this discussion there. We have some other NBA news to hit from the weekend in the league. First thing, Stephen Curry is going to miss multiple weeks with a left leg injury. Shams Charania had this morning. He went knee to knee with Walker McKinley from the Dallas Mavericks on Saturday night in a game. Luka Doncic, by the way, did not play in. The team has now said that he suffered partial tears to his superior tibiofibular ligaments and interosseous membrane. If I said those things wrong, I'm not a doctor. I apologize. And had suffered a contusion to his left lower leg. Brendan, what does this mean for the Golden State Warriors?
Well, now that we are doing this segment once again, thanks to Kyrie Irving and Nico Harrison, we have a little more information, and my take is a little more extreme when you're talking about partial tears. When it was just, soreness or like that really hurt to bump my knee against that other guy, I think I was a little more bullish that they could just stay alive. They were decent without him in the 11 games he missed. I think they were 6-5 in the end of 2022. But if you're talking about, more than a month, 2 months, I mean, that's the end of the season. It's at least a possibility now, I think, that he misses most of the rest of the season, if not the rest of the season, when I hear that. And as much as I don't feel like there's any team pushing them from the back, except for the Lakers right now, that I still think the 1 through 10, 1 through 11 in the West is going to be basically the same, just because there's not enough upward momentum from some of these OKCs or anyone else. I'm not sure if I'm picking the Warriors out of any of that, if I'm getting a severely hurt and recovering Steph Curry, which was what we had last year at the end of the season, and he came out of it. But this just feels a little worse to me when I hear tear and multiple different components of one injury. That doesn't feel like, he'll be back by March 1st.
Yeah, I think this kind of takes away any upside they had of maybe like pushing out of the play-in tournament. This is going to put, unless they go on a really kind of improbable run without him and however long he misses, I think that it kind of makes their path, it's just going to make their path to repeating much harder. Like they could get Denver in round 1. They could get Memphis in round 1. Like I think they could beat out of those teams fully healthy, but it's like that's a lot harder of a path to have to deal with them in round 1 instead of round 2 or round 3 in the conference finals, right? Like it just makes it a little bit harder, and you just gotta hope Steph is actually fully healthy when he comes back. That is the other part of this. Like, what is Steph, whose game is so reliant on his movement, his ability to get around, his ability to cause chaos off ball. If this takes him a while to heal and it takes him a while to ramp back up, this puts a big dent into kind of what he could be. I wonder what this means for them at the deadline as well. They've not historically been buyers, but does this try to get a win now piece for one of their young guys now in some way? Because this could be like the last ride with what's going on with Draymond and everything, and dating back to obviously the preseason and the punch around the world. This just complicates an already very complicated Warriors season, and you want Steph to be healthy because he's one of the best players in the league. He's one of the most fun players to watch on a night-to-night basis. He did actually suffer this injury a day after taking a hit in the leg from Zeke Naji in a game against the Nuggets. So it's just kind of a tough weekend for Curry. You hope he's healthy, but I think this has to just kind of like their playoff position now feels much more likely to be a 7-8 seed and a really dangerous one. But the odds of them like making another title run out of that spot is it's just much lower. It's very hard. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't.
Let's move on to good news, I think. The New York Liberty, the same building. Did you realize so much drama could happen in one arena in 1 week?
Joe Tsai, center of the basketball world, right there.
Sure is. The prediction we made, I mean, it wasn't exactly unexpected, Chris, but Brianna Stewart and Courtney Vandersloot, which was a little bit more of a surprise, both announcing their signing with the New York Liberty for the 2023 WNBA season. Stewie announced it with a Empire State Building lit up with her nickname on the window panes, and then Courtney Vandersloot, after a little bit of a fake out about where she might go, is she going to the Seattle Storm, was out there for a day or two. She eventually announces she's joining with her current Turkey teammate for Fenerbahce, Brianna Stewart. So, super team, Chris. I think, I don't even know, super duper mega team. There has to be a new classification, I feel like, for two recent WNBA MVPs and two other All-Stars all on this team at one time in the nation's biggest market. I mean, man.
This feels like kind of a very important summer for the WNBA to me, Brendan, just from what players are telling us they want, what Brianna Stewart has said she wanted, what that meant for Vandersloot, what Candace Parker, kind of moving on from a team that once she won a title with years ago, that Sky team is now very much like disassembled. That Sky team that was so successful and doesn't exist anymore, with like Azura Stevens going to the Sparks as well. Like, and this isn't like you pointed this out in the notes. Like, this is a great point. The players didn't just like go to LA. Like the market, I'm sure, plays some part in it, just because like New York is this big thing that's a homecoming for Stewie of sorts. But that's like an owner that is willing to spend. Mark Davis has, I think, really endeared himself to the Aces players on the other side of this with like his willingness to put up money and to be a proactive spender. That's a really big advantage in the way this league kind of works right now. The basketball side of this, obviously very important. This also just feels like a very important like player and business story in a lot of ways to me. That I can't extrapolate these two things in that sense.
I think we can start there. The players, they're reinforcing the advantages of team owners who are actually invested, and there's been more of those that have bought into the W in recent years. There's been a lot of ownership change in this league recently, and a lot of way wealthier people buying into it. And I think you're seeing the advantages that is going to provide for those organizations, one off season after another, just skyrocketing. The charter flight debate, which we can get into here, is one part of this, but when you talk about the Aces, they have a committed practice facility, right? Because they don't have an NBA team. They have a practice facility that is on the same general campus as where the Raiders are, with Mark Davis being there, but it's for them. It's a basketball court. The Liberty got moved from the outskirts of outskirts, might as well be in the Atlantic Ocean of New York, to Barclays Center when he bought the team right away. And that was after James Dolan had taken them out of Madison Square Garden for Lord knows what reason, right? And so all these things, you can talk about what Holly Rowe had on ESPN, that Brianna Stewart is factoring in amenities like housing and these types of things that I don't think are collectively bargained and restricted about what an owner can do, like charter flights are. All of this stuff is going to continue to matter. And then on the other side of it, we have a commissioner of the league who I'm not exactly positive is on the side of those owners or the big-time players, in the same way that we assume is almost always going to be the case for the NBA, right? It's a given to us that the biggest spenders, the most powerful players are going to have the power. That's not the dynamic in the WNBA right now. The dynamic is big-time owners and big-time players pushing back against the status quo to change in the way that they think it should happen. And that's just a very bizarre thing to have happen for a league that is trying to grow. To have forces within it that are kind of restricting that is not what I would do personally if I was trying to build a thing. I would not push back against building the thing I'm supposed to be building, but here we are. That's what Kathy Engelbert is doing, and that's what a lot of the lower level, smaller market owners are doing in the WNBA right now.
Well, and like you see, like the expansion stuff hasn't happened as fast as I kind of would have expected, which I think is kind of interesting.
No.
Like, and that would be capital bringing into the league. That would be capital coming into the league, right? In the charter.
Do you want to know how much?
Yeah, hit me.
Do you want to know how much the expansion fee? So this week in the NWSL, 2 expansion franchises got announced. Did you see how much the expansion fees were going to be? $50 million.
Yeah.
$50 million. And the league is saying, no, we want to make sure Indiana has a stable economic structure. We want to make sure that Connecticut has a stable, Chicago has a stable economic structure. It's insanity. It'd be like, pick your most chaotic or worst run NBA franchise. And if the league was like, no, we're not going to expand to Vegas and Seattle because we really want to make sure that Sacramento is in a good spot. What? Yeah.
Doesn't
Sacramento
make any
sense. Can suck and lose money if they want to. It's craziness.
Well, like you could absolutely probably take some of that money. Maybe that covers the flights. Like there's just like ways you could do this, and it's like they're almost like it feels like they're getting in the way of their own growth, and it's like this was the case with some of the political stuff the players did, and a lot of things. It feels like the players drive all of this in the league. They do, they just do, and like that is, I feel like that is very troubling when like you almost want the commissioner at this stage of the league to be more of an advocate for what this league could be and its potential, and kind of making life as good as possible for the players, and that doesn't really happen. That is not exactly what is happening here with kind of these decisions that are being made, and that is a bummer. It just is, and it's like this is only gonna become like a more pressing thing because look at all the talent that's coming up in the next couple of years: Cameron Brink, Haley Jones, Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Haley Van Lith, like Aliyah Boston is coming in. Like you have all of these superstar, you have all these great star players coming in that have really big. That are very popular based on their college, based on their socials. Caitlin Clark is like one of the most like fun players to watch in basketball, regardless of gender. Just like a walking highlight. You should be like getting the league in a place to really kind of be booming, and it's like you're holding it back almost. That's where it feels like they're like ready to go into drive to some degree, and maybe there's some economic factors like we don't understand that are part of this. But I think you got to like really kind of push forward a little bit.
Yeah, Stewart seemed to get up to a point, to bring it back to her, where she backed off on the charter flight thing. Like she wasn't, and this is not criticism, she wasn't ready to, it didn't feel like the time, it seems like, for her to hold up her entire free agency in order to make something happen here, right? The math is $25 million. Kathy Engelbert has said that on the record. That's not a ton of money. The NWSL, again, to return there, they have an official airline partner, which is Delta Airlines. They don't fly charter, but they're allowed to. It's not collectively bargained out of what they're allowed to do, like it is in the WNBA, where you had Josiah get fined quite a bit of money because he was flying his team to like Napa Valley for a team field trip last season and couple different trips throughout the year. And $25 million is not a lot, but Stewart must have seen something that made her feel like it's not the right time right now. But this league is coming up on when the players can cut out of the collective bargaining agreement. Next year, we will have negotiations over the TV deal with ESPN, where that will be up, which is itself like was not negotiated by Engelbert, but completely flubbed. So this isn't going anywhere. Whoever the next big free agent is will probably pick up this fight and keep pushing, because it doesn't seem like the forces that be are necessarily on their side. From a basketball standpoint, Chris, I have a question for you. Did the Liberty need Courtney Vandersloot?
No, but like I think it puts Sabrina Ionescu in a very interesting position where she's going to need to do some off-ball stuff that we've never seen her really do in the WNBA. That's where this led me, is like wondering what this means for the evolution of Sabrina.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always kind of liked that she has the versatility to not have to be on the ball, and like even
but she's
her
been on the ball a ton
since
she came in. Is the thing. It's just like she's been like on the ball a ton.
But it's a little different than it is for other players, right? Because she is so big, she can
Yeah.
shoot. Her being on the ball is not like, I don't know, Trae Young being on the ball, right? It's like a little bit of a different type of thing.
Trae Young's not shooting well. Maybe we need to aim higher than Trae Young.
It's fair. But I just wonder, I'm like, I don't know, outside of having depth and star talent and being able to withstand injuries and all the things we talk about with superstars, I'm not really sure if Courtney Vandersloot, like, they had a lot of depth already. I'm just going to be curious to see how they use her, and if we look back at the end of the season and feel like they needed her to get where they were going to go, or did she, like, it's like the upper bounds of what you can even do on a basketball court. It's like, well, yeah, I guess the Warriors, when they had Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, if they also had LeBron James, that would have been pretty cool. But, like, what would have been different? They won every title every year except for 2016. So what difference did it make? I don't know. I'm just curious from that aspect, because they had point guards, they have Ionescu, they had plenty of shooting, they had plenty of star power. Now they add this. It's like, well, I wonder what they'll do with her.
I mean, it's interesting when I went and looked at the title odds, and it feels like it's the 2-team race now, because all of these teams feel so overloaded with talent in some ways. Obviously, the Aces have like the 4 number 1 picks in their lineup, and then Chelsea Gray, who's incredible. The Libs have Stewie and Ionescu and Laney and Jonquel Jones, and like this whole thing is just loaded. Like these things are loaded. Aces are at plus 130 right now. This is from FanDuel. Aces are at plus 130. Liberty is at plus 140. Mystics are third at plus 1200. Mercury at plus 2900, and the Sun are plus 3000. This is like the odds would tell you this is like a 2-team race, and I can't even really disagree with that. It almost feels like if we don't get this, like in the finals, it'll be like kind of a disappointment at this point, which like isn't really fair to these other teams. We have to see how the season goes, but the season feels so much about like the Aces and the Liberty now. It just kind of does to me in a lot of ways.
Well, and it's the fact that, right, Jones came from Connecticut to the Liberty. So she took a contender away because she made them in large part a contender.
Yep.
Stewie helped make this. So it's less about like heaping praise on what a great job these two incredible teams have done, and more so the fact that a lot of the players that left their team were kind of holding them up in a way, and now that's not there. The W had a lot of parity in recent seasons. Feels like there's a lot less of it now, and that consolidation came from certain places where, we didn't see somebody go from the Aces to the Liberty, for instance. You know what I mean? It was like you're sucking out all the talent. So I do think those odds are basically right where I would put things, and there's still some movement to be done. Skylar Diggins-Smith, we don't know where she'll end up. There's some bit moves, role players, etc. But I think this is trending toward a pretty big, Godzilla versus Kong type of bout here in the league, and it's going to be an awesome season. I hope. I mean, every regular season matchup is going to be must-see TV, and I think we're probably headed towards seeing them in the finals.
Can't wait to see them in August. Big win for me personally. And then Brendan, would you if you had to pick one right now, who would you pick?
I think that I like what the Liberty have the most. Because I think their team, I could see it getting replicated. Well, we haven't seen it yet, but I could see what the pieces on this team do sustaining for another season a little bit more than the Aces. And what I mean by that is the Aces had some hot shooting seasons from players that you never know if it'll continue. Jackie Young shot like 50% from deep. They are losing Hamby, who I know is not, some sort of superstar player, but you always have to wonder with the age of Candace Parker if she'll actually be that upgrade, just if you're talking about figuring out what the season's layout will be. And I just tend to love teams with floor spacing the best. I know the Aces were the best 3-point shooting team in the W last year, but again, if some of those players regress and you're talking about a little bit of a worse offense, then give me the team with bona fide superstar shooters at basically every position now, which the Liberty have, and still enough defense to make it work. That would be my pick, would be the Liberty. So I guess I'm disagreeing with FanDuel a little bit there, but
I mean, not by much. I think I agree as well, but it's like I feel like we've seen just the Aces stuff is like more of building on last year, obviously with like the change out of Parker and Hamby, the Liberty are going to have to like kind of grow into what they're going to be, and that adds like a little bit of a different element to it. Where like you could almost, I wonder if that's why the Aces are just like a tad bit more favored, a tad bit like ahead of the Liberty, the odd situation, just because of that. But Brendan, we have to move on now. Let's go to NBA All-Star reserves quickly. Any big snubs you feel out of who wasn't named for you?
No, I don't even. I think the conversation to be had here, which you and I agree on, is it's time to expand this. Did you? I never realized that. I think I was reading this. This has basically been the NBA All-Star structure for the entire history of the league. Would be 12 players on each side back when it was like Bill Russell and, a bunch of guys who look like they could be your dad running around. And that feels wrong to me. There's so much parity and talent in the NBA right now. I mean, we talked about it when we were breaking down the conferences. We talked about it with what would go into the Curry injury, the Kyrie. Like, everything is so jumbled because there's so much star talent. So, yeah, the snubs indicate that. And I feel like we saw some questionable decisions go toward, veterans, defensive players, second players on solid teams over great players on middling teams and all that. And I think that all kind of speaks to whatever direction you see it, you're probably going to think that about it. And my thought is it's just not enough players to represent how much talent there is. We shouldn't be cutting off players just because that's how we've always done it. Especially because, look, we talk every year about how we don't want people to get injured during the All-Star game. Let's get some more guys out there so everybody can play less minutes. I think that would be a nice way to incentivize it as well.
Yeah, I think 15 is necessary, just reflecting the talent of the league. I don't think this is like a universal opinion. Like, I asked JB Bickerstaff about this before a Cavs game the other day, and he said, like, I'm an old school guy. Like, I would prefer 15. Or sorry, to keep it at 12 and like not expand to 15. I'm sure.
But like 12 is just such an arbitrary number.
I know. It's just like the way it was, and you don't want to change it. I do feel like there are some guys that there are so many guys that I feel like are not going to be named All-Stars this year, but played at an All-Star level. And like Anthony Edwards is one. James Harden is one. Darius Garland, I think, is absolutely one. Pascal Siakam is absolutely one. I think Aaron Gordon, to some degree, is like having like an all-star level season and didn't get in. Anthony Davis, even with the games missed, I think is playing that well. There are so many guys that I think should be in. It is cool that there are a lot of first-time guys, Halliburton, Jaren Jackson Jr., Larry Markkinen. Like, that is very cool. I think there are a lot of guys that are just like at an all-star level and aren't getting in, and that's kind of a bummer. I did, though. Did you see how Jimmy Butler reacted to it? He said he gets to go on vacation now. And I kind of like
Didn't Jimmy not play in the All-Star game that one season? I think it was 2019. He made it and just like took it off, even though he didn't really have a serious injury. I think Jimmy likes the break.
I mean, look, Jimmy kind of maybe has like the right attitude about this, and it's just like, go get your rest, my guy, especially when you're like post 30 and it's been around the block a little bit. But like, there are so many guys that I think should be in Salt Lake that aren't going to be, and I think that in itself is kind of a bummer. This begs the question, though. Okay, Steph Curry doesn't play in the All-Star game. Who from the West, if you're going to pick a West guard, should kind of step in and replace him? I have two candidates if you're going to pick from the West only.
Yeah, well, we also probably have Zion needing to be replaced.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to play in the game either, and that's two starters, which is also like, I don't know how they replace the starters in terms of which from the reserves get bumped up, but
just put Embiid as a starter because he probably just should have been a starter anyway. Even
just the sixth East starter.
Yeah, honestly, whatever. He's deserving enough. Yeah.
Yeah, put him in the whatever color jersey you need him to have, but he's very much more than the guys we're going to talk about. I think more deserving. I think from a guard, I would put Anthony Edwards. And this speaks to the point that I was just making. I'm going to go toward. I think I'm going to make it a rule for myself in the future as we're thinking about this stuff and getting to talk about it, that I'm going to defer to the stud breakout guy on a middling team that has helped to keep them afloat or, been the only reason that they are where they are over. Because the ones I had the biggest issue with, and it wasn't Steph or Zion who might need to be replaced, but like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Drew Holiday to me were two that I just didn't really see that Memphis or Milwaukee. You have to be amazing to me to get two All-Stars. And I think the Celtics deserve it, right? Like, they got two. I actually think the Sixers deserve it to a degree,
Yeah.
although I guess I'm kind of arguing with myself there. But Harden I just think has had a better season than Jackson or Holiday. But Anthony Edwards would be my pick. And then I'll probably go, if I have to pick a big, I'm probably going Anthony Davis, just because there aren't a ton of obvious big man choices in the West. But that's you're getting 2 All-Stars from the Lakers who aren't even 500.
Yeah, but like win for the Lakers. I think the other name at guard would be De'Aaron Fox for me. I think he's having an awesome year. I know the Kings maybe if they meet your criteria, that's a question. But I think he's having like an all-star level season that they would absolutely have to put you in that conversation. He's just playing the best basketball of his career. A big part of why that team is third in there. Like Sabonis maybe gets a lot of the headlines there, but I think Fox deserves like a really long look in that case. You could make and I think Davis is probably the right pick if you have to replace Zion as a big, which, again, the Lakers that whole thing is funny, but it would be the obvious kind of one. I think like Booker would be in that conversation for me as well, but it's just been hurt a lot, and I don't know if he'd even be available for the All-Star game at this point.
He will be available. He's going to come back this week, but I just think he's only played 29 games. It's kind of hard for me to give. Davis is the same way, but again, there's just more guards. So I would definitely put Edwards and Fox ahead in that capacity. It's more about the guys that I think should be in than it is about the guys I think should be out. And that's why I would be in favor of expanding it. But I do think if I have to pick players who I don't think should be in, it's Jackson and Holiday to me. I get favoring defense, but they just if I'm just picking names out of a hat and I get Drew Holiday, I'm not going to be super happy. But we have something else to get to, Chris. Yeah. Everyone should want them trade deadline All-Stars. And this is going to be a little bit quick, I think. Yeah, we're just going to make our rapid fire case for 5 players that everybody should want on the trade deadline who aren't getting enough love, who aren't being completely bidded for in the way that we think they should be, basically. The first one for me is Pascal Siakam. He has a season right now that is basically only matched by like LeBron, Luka, and Curry from a counting stats standpoint. I know the Raptors aren't amazing. I don't really dock him for that if he's the one thing kind of holding them above water. I think they're 6 points better per 100 possessions with him on the floor. He can do everything. If I'm talking about a number 2 like we were with Luka earlier with the Kyrie conversation, Chris, I see Siakam as a no-brainer guy to pair with a superstar. If I'm Dallas, if I'm even the Suns, what is my long-term co-star going to be for X number 1 star? I think Siakam should be a no-brainer. Maybe he's not available, but other than that, I'd be knocking on Toronto's door ceaselessly until the trade deadline.
I think the question for me is just like, is he actually available? Like, and I get the vibe would be to me that he's like really not. Like, he hasn't been the name that kind of least discussed out of there. I'm sure teams have called. I'm sure like he would be great in Dallas. I think you're absolutely that's a great call. He is just the one you would absolutely bid a lot for. It feels like he is probably just not actually available in the way some of these other guys might be.
Well, they should be crossing their fingers that he does not get All-NBA this season then, because they will be on the hook for a potential Supermax contract if he gets All-NBA this season, Supermax extension. And I don't think they want to keep him if that's going to be the cost into his mid-30s. But that's up Supermax. To Masai Ujiri, I suppose.
Yes. Supermaxes really haven't worked out for people, have they?
Because they qualify so late. I think it'll work out for Booker, actually. Booker's the one, he just got one, and he's still only in his mid-20s, so it's only going to pay him, I think, through his age 30 or 31 season. You got to get it early in your career, otherwise, you're paying for past production too much.
Yeah, which is like good for the players. Like get as much money as you possibly can. But like if you're a team and you're building this out, that's really tricky. Okay, my number one.
The players end up getting traded. The players end up getting traded. So
or you could be the Wizards and give Bradley Beal the Supermax and give him a no trade clause.
Dame. Yeah.
Yeah, but Dame is like the Rock of Portland, and like they've had like the vibes. It's like we should maybe do an episode about this at some point. But like my opinion on like the Blazers and like some of them being in the middle is very different than I look at the Wizards being kind of in the middle. And like I don't really know if that's fair, but I have very different emotions, and one's positive and one is very negative.
It's fair. It is a good conversation topic because it's like the polar opposites of what standing pat can be. Blazers have tons of fans and everybody loves that team. They're just kind of in the middle for mismanagement reasons, whereas the Wizards seem to want to be in the middle. But your number one, Josh Hart, is that what you said?
Yeah, Josh Hart. So look, competent wings are very, very needed. He has
Speaking
a weird,
of Portland.
Yeah, speaking of Portland, weird contract. So like he is kind of non-guaranteed. If he picks up this option, like he's gonna decline that, and then like that's gonna lead him to see. You have to be kind of sure you can re-sign him. I think in most cases if you're gonna make that deal. But he's just like a competent wing who maybe doesn't shoot enough threes as you would like, but is like a competent wing who can shoot it and is gonna give you stout defense and be a guy who can play in the playoffs. I just think like Josh Hart should be like got by someone who needs wing help. Excuse me.
I think the thing with Portland there will be, can they use him to upgrade themselves, but still come away feeling like the team getting him is also happy. Like you have to find the perfect win-win trade with him, because if you just get rid of him as the Blazers, you just get worse, because he is a pretty integral part. But they're only 500, so it's not like they're going to be content with their team. You got to just find that sweet spot of both people come away happy.
Brandon, who's your number 2?
My number 2 is Naz Reid. The secret's out. If you listen to Anthony Edwards on Austin Rivers' podcast from last week, they basically said like even they're nervous. Like he's on the scouting report now. He's the most unorthodox dude. Like I don't know why I'm so giddy talking about Naz Reid. I'm like the happiest I've been all podcast, but he's just a funny, unorthodox player. He has a really high center of gravity. He's one of those guys where you feel like everything is in the hips. Like he just runs and jumps and does things in a way different way, which just feels like there's not a lot of players like that this day and age, because everybody's been trained to infinity by the time they get to the NBA. The number one reason he's on my list, though, is he's apparently only looking for $10 million in this offseason, which I'm like, hey, Naz Reid's agent, if you're going to leak stuff, why don't you shoot a little higher? Why are you telling people you only want like the mid-level exception? Like throw 20 out there like Jakob Poeltl's agent is and make it a compromise when you get 15. That was kind of funny. But if I'm getting him for 10 million, I'll give up whatever it takes. That's a great backup big man. Great third big for any team, I think.
Yeah, I would you rather pay him like 10 or would you rather pay Jakob Poeltl 15? Because Jakob's not getting 20. He wants 20. I don't think he's getting 20.
It depends on what my team is. I think Poeltl is a much, much, much better defender, but he can't shoot free throws, and he's definitely not a floor spacer. Whereas Reid can take and make some threes, and he's a little more mobile, a little better offensively. They're kind of polar opposite players. I think if I had like the Nets, I probably prefer Reid. You know, if I'm the Pelicans, maybe I prefer Poeltl. Right? It's kind of dependent, but if the number is that different, then I probably would go Reid every time, because I don't think the gap in overall talent's that far apart, and it looks like Reid's going to be on the bargain.
Yeah, I kind of like Reid as like maybe like your like Isaiah Hartenstein like style backup, and Poeltl I think could start for you if you want to feel like the Zubac route. That's where I kind of differentiate them. I think is where I'd feel comfortable, but it's a good chat. I wonder do you have like a good fit idea for him?
I think the Pelicans. Actually, I know I said Poeltl maybe makes more sense, but I don't think they make a trade like that right now, because they still have Valanciunas. Whereas I think if you can go out and get Reid as another option in that big man mix, I just want the Pelicans to be more and more versatile. I know they have Larry Nance, but I kind of like that one. I think if I'm like I just said, the Nets as another depth piece there behind Nick Claxton to give them another big man, I could see that. Maybe the Clippers to replace Hartenstein, who you just mentioned. A contending team that just needs a little bit of a better small ball look is basically the types of teams I would be looking at.
Yes. Okay, let's go to my number 2. This is John Collins, the Atlanta Hawks, much often in trade rumors, big man, really good player, I think is being underutilized in what he's doing in Atlanta. The contract is a lot. He's got like a bunch of money left on this deal that maybe makes him unappealing to teams. But I just want to see him get moved. And I think Brendan Phoenix is the place I kind of most want to see him end up. I really like that kind of landing spot for him. If they could find a way to kind of make that work and allow him to play some small ball 5 and do some more stuff. I really, really like John Collins. He's going to go somewhere else and I think be really good outside of the Trae Young kind of the orbit. So I would just like John Collins to get actually moved and get to kind of go through a little bit of a renaissance for himself.
Couldn't agree more. I think if you look, he's not shooting the ball well this year, and Atlanta just hasn't been very good, but he is, in some seasons, been one of the better pick and roll finishers in the NBA, just as far as guys who finish as the person who set a screen in an NBA play. You add all those up, he has been among the best at that, and that's exactly what you would be bringing him in to do. So if you just pair up here's the role he's going to play and he's elite at it. I don't understand why teams aren't jumping over themselves to go get him. He's not people talk about the contract like it's some sort of, it's very long, but $25 million for a good starter is about normal in the NBA these days. And he can be a backup five for you too. So I agree. That's why I liked him for the Suns, is he could play next to Ayton. He could play behind Ayton. If you just pair him with a good point guard, which he has right now, and an actual structure, I think, defensively that works, I think you're going to be really, really happy. I literally could see him in most teams in the NBA who don't already have that type of big man in place.
Really good player. Very big fan. Who's your number 3?
My number 3 is Jared Vanderbilt. I don't think this one is going to be much of a secret or surprise to anybody. He's kind of probably accurately rated if you read how often his name is popping up. I think Mark Stein has listed him as one of the most likely players to be traded. So this is a little bit less in the spirit of what this list was supposed to be, but I guess I'm just agreeing with all these NBA executives who want him. I just think if you are, I mean, he was the starting center during Utah's crazy start to the season. Now they're a little more traditional with Walker Kessler as their starting five, but he was anchoring a defense. Maybe not an amazing defense, but a very solid defense for multiple months at the beginning of the season. And now he's coming off the bench and still being good. If you're a team and you need to defend Giannis or Bam or Draymond or Anthony Davis or any of those types of players, those small ball five types, Vanderbilt should be number 1 on your wish list, I think.
He is like the guy that if you're in need of that guy, I think, to defend Giannis, Bam, Draymond, or honestly, wonder if someone would try to use him as we talked about this in relation to the Nuggets, try him as hey, throw him on Jokic as the small to let your center play and help kind of thing. I don't know if that really works with him, but you could try it. And I think it's good to have that place in your toolkit. It's absolutely one. He's of the guys that are kind of maybe in Utah. To me, maybe the most interesting one to maybe be moved. I there's someone on my list from Utah as well. It's actually 2 players from Utah on my 5. So
do them. Go for it.
So it's Malik Beasley and Kelly Olynyk. And I like all 3 of these Utah guys as guys that could help teams. I think Beasley as a movement shooter, teams really need these. He did tell Mark Stein he wants to stay in Utah. We'll see if that happens. Kelly Olynyk, we've talked about him. Small ball 5, can stretch it out. Has been in the playoffs before, which is a plus. I think could be a really good fit for a team that needs an offensive punch up front, kind of like the opposite of what Vanderbilt's going to provide you. Vanderbilt's going to stand in the corner and maybe take some threes. Olynyk's going to actually put up some shots. I think you have these kind of various pieces in Utah who I think Utah should sell on, pivot to this era that they have, which is Sexton and Walker Kessler and Lauri Markkanen and Ochai Agbaji, and like really go in on this movement and start that process. Get more picks for these guys to upgrade your roster down the line. Jordan Clarkson can be there for vibes, and that's fine. Shout out to Jordan Clarkson. Get that bag, my guy. But Vanderbilt
Clarkson is kind of on the Clarkson is kind of on the Siakam list, where it's like, if he's available, I probably would have had him in my 5 here. I don't think they're trading him. So these guys are much more available, to your point.
Yes. Do you have a favorite landing place for any of these guys? Because I like the Golden State one that you shouted out for Olynyk on one of our first episodes. And then Beasley, I think Cleveland or New Orleans would make a lot of sense.
Like you said, with Beasley, it's like, who wouldn't want him? You know what I mean? I like the one, and this has been, everybody has been paired with Malik Beasley at this point, so we're not going to be breaking ground of who we think he could fit with. But I like the Memphis one that's been out there, too. I just think they need a shooter more than they seem to think they need a shooter, I guess. So I don't know if he'll end up on the Grizzlies, but and Cleveland would be another one. Any of the teams that are kind of a shooter away from feeling really good about their roster, Cleveland might have a few more needs than that, but I would like him. I think Olynyk would still be Golden State for me. Vanderbilt, I kind of like him in Brooklyn. I think he'd be a fun backup for Claxton, and he's the same type of player, maybe not quite as elite at any of the things Claxton is elite at, but he's a backup, and he would fill the same type of role. I really like that one. People have been saying Philly, and it's like, okay, Philly can't have every good fit player that they
can't
want.
have. That's like having like 2 PJ Tuckers, and like 1 PJ Tucker is enough.
If Vanderbilt's playing like 8 minutes in the playoffs, that will actually upset me. I don't want that. I want him to go somewhere where he can provide a really fundamental and needed value role, like not backing up the MVP potentially. That's not fun.
Yes. All right. Who is your number 4?
My number 4 is Emmanuel Quickly. This is a player the Knicks seem to have lucked into drafting and done a really good job finding value at the end of the first round. And then immediately it's like they don't want him. He's out there in all these rumors. Maybe that's other teams wanting him and trying to drum up some potential problems between him and the Knicks, or who knows. I don't really know why the Knicks would want to get rid of him. I know they have a lot of players like this, and he's the one coming up on a new contract the soonest, so that probably is a part of why, but he's shooting 37% from deep since December 1st. He has the best net rating on the Knicks. I don't know how much more I need to say. He's like a 6'4" combo guard who can shoot and defend. Another player, as we've been saying, that every team could really use. The Suns, I mean, any team that has some guard questions that wants to win a championship, I would be looking at Quickly. Because then you can also turn around and potentially sign and trade him in the offseason if you want to.
Yeah, I like the scoring burst. Like, we're kind of like a lot of guards in New York, like kind of like maybe a chance for him to reboot. I kind of wonder if he might be better to go to like a team that is maybe like a little step back of the real contenders phase, but like a team on the up and up that could use a little scoring punch, I think would be really interesting for him. The Knicks are like good, but also just like remain very, very weird to me. Like just so many guards.
They just have a lot of players.
Yeah.
They just have a lot of players and no bona fide superstar. It's almost like they should have traded for Donovan Mitchell or something. Somebody like that. Not being specific or anything, just throwing a name out there.
Yeah, almost like the guy who, like I said a lot, that he thought he was going to be a Knick, and whose agency is very tied into the Knicks brass. Like they should have just traded for that guy who's having the best season of his career. Maybe it would have made some sense.
Might have gone well for them.
Might have gone well for them. Brendan, I already gave my number 3 and 4. That was Beasley and Olynyk. So give me your number 5.
My number 5 is Luke Kennard. Just getting DNP CDs from Ty Lue, always, just for years at this point. We'll just, maybe we'll score 20, and then the next night you're like, did Ty Lue not think he was the right fit out there tonight? Okay. And then that's a Clippers thing, and I get that. It's not even really me criticizing Lue, although I do think there's been times where I watch that team and I do think like, hey, Luke Kennard might have made a little bit of a difference when the ball gets stagnant or they don't seem to have quite enough shooting out there or their offense just can't do enough when one of the stars is resting. I just think Luke Kennard is 26 on his second team. He spent multiple seasons with multiple teams now, and I still don't feel like we know what he is. I still feel like there's untapped potential there as just a secondary ball handler who can just shoot the lights out. And he's 6'5", so yeah, he's going to get abused defensively, but it's not like he's 5'11", and trying to survive on defense. So you're not going to get destroyed when he's out there. And again, the Clippers are a team who I think could use Luke Kennard, but if they don't want him, sign me up. A number of teams I think would be better with Luke Kennard.
Yeah, look, he's already 26, but I think there's just like a good, competent player in there, can shoot it, can ball handle. Like those are skills teams need, like, and particularly teams that like maybe play a little more like egalitarian, like not ISO dominant basketball. Like he's a guy that can provide you, just fits into your kind of flow of the thing. He feels like a guy, Brennan, that if like Kenny Atkinson was coaching a team, I would like to see Luke Kennard on a Kenny Atkinson coach team.
That's a deep pull, but I like it.
I don't know,
so
like
the Warriors
what team
in like 5 years is what you're saying, basically.
Yeah,
the Warriors
like,
in like 2030.
Yeah, or like maybe like I could see like Charlotte being a team as like a rehabilitation place for him if like Terry Rozier gets dealt by them at the deadline or something, and like they want to get another ball handler in there off of LaMelo.
You know what's funny? I agree with you on that. I feel like he could be good with the Pistons with their new look.
Yeah. With
Cade and Ivy, like just another ball handler out there. You could play all three. You could play him with one of those two guys just to give some shooting. Like he's going to slide in because he's a killer shooter and he knows what he's doing with the ball in his hands. It's weird. Indiana. He only costs like Indiana. He only costs like $14.5 million next year. So if he's going to get jarred loose from the Clippers roster in one of their potential moves this deadline, I would be on the phone saying, can I be the third team? Can we talk about something in the offseason? Like get that guy in his prime and let him actually play finally in his career.
Yes. Let's last one of my number 5, Alex Caruso. Look, they apparently want like multiple firsts for him, which like Artur's like, what are we doing here, my guy? That's a lot for Alex Caruso. But look, great defensive guard on a great contract. Lots of teams could use what he does. Maybe doesn't shoot as much as you would like, but like this is a guy that I think could be like a rock solid top 8 playoff guy for you. I don't see really like the downside of getting him and helping some teams. The Warriors would be a good fit for him. I did that Fit Kings trade, which was like a first and Davion Mitchell for him, which I like for both sides. I think there's just a lot of teams that could use Caruso in a league with so many scoring guards. I think he makes sense. Like could maybe Denver. Like, I could see that being kind of like a fun, like, maybe not the perfect backup point guard if you're trying to get some more Monty Morris energy, but if you're moving on from Bones and you want to go the opposite direction, Caruso can make some sense there. Like, this is just a good player. Lakers probably could use him. Maybe they should have signed him instead of THT in the first place, but really good player.
We just have to throw that in every episode. We have to establish a quota for ourselves to just put the dig on the Lakers and that decision.
Yeah, that in the Knicks. Yeah, just like could have keep the better player. Like, shouldn't have been a hard decision, but c'est la vie.
No.
Caruso's
Caruso only costs less than $10 million a year for the next 2 seasons after this. So
yeah,
I actually think the thing about the asking price being so high and people maybe balking at that a little bit, Chris, is kind of reasonable if I'm Chicago. I mean, this might be a top 3 defensive guard in the NBA, and he's on a bargain contract, and he's only 28 years old. I kind of think Chicago is negotiating from a position of strength here. Maybe it's not 2 unprotected first-round picks, something crazy like that, but I think 2 picks of some kind is a pretty reasonable place to start. Maybe it eventually becomes a young player like Bones Highland instead of one of those picks, or who knows. But if I'm the Bulls, I'm saying you're giving me everything I want because I know what I have in Caruso, and I'm not giving him away for nothing.
Yeah, it's just like 2 firsts is just like a lot of picks for a guy who like doesn't always want to shoot. And like I saw you watch the defensive highlights and what he can do. It's like this guy's an absolute defensive monster. But like he's taking Brennan 2.2 threes per game this year. He shoots the ball 4 times a game.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Would you rather give up 2 first-round picks for him or Bojan Bogdanovic?
That might be situation dependent.
Sure. But a lot of the same teams are going to be looking at both guys.
Yeah, maybe him just because... Maybe him in a vacuum just because the defense is just like elite. And like he is going to shoot threes. But Bojan does provide like that like he can just go off in a way that you really, really need. Yeah, that's tough. I wouldn't want to give up 2 firsts for either, I think is my actual answer. Like
yeah, it seems like you're more on the value of the pick side and neither player might be your answer.
It's just like 2 picks is just like a lot of picks for like a very good role player. Like a first and like some kind of young player is kind of what I'd be trying to give up for something. But if the market dictates what it dictates, then like, hey, like who am I to say differently? Should we end there, Brendan? I think we've had this has been an eventful episode. There's a lot that has happened in the NBA and the WNBA the last several weeks, but
just since we hit record, there's been a lot that's happened.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Lot happening in the world of basketball right now. But thanks again, everyone, for tuning into this episode of the Just Basketball Show. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing this one. Thanks again to the whole team at Den of Geek for making this possible with us and doing a great job on the video stuff. Please go subscribe to us on YouTube. Subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Give us that 5-star review. Follow Just B-Ball Fans on TikTok, Just Basketball Show on Instagram. Find us on Twitter at Just B-Ball Show and on Facebook as well. I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. Back at it soon with another episode.